we can go in the next 4 years. I'm going to introduce Stephen Mugford, who is co-chair of this conference, and will then move this panel along beyond that. Stephen was born in Great Britain, moved to New Zealand in 1970 and Australia in 1974. He's with the Australian National University since that time. Last year at the conference, he came up and criticized the way we ran the conference. He had some very constructive criticisms, and therefore we made him a co-chair of the conference this year as a reward. Before Stephen comes, I want to thank him for saving the day the other day at the American Public Health Association meeting. I made the mistake of calling APHA's staff offices on Monday to confirm a presentation we were supposed to give, Stephen and I and Michael Montagna and a couple other people, and they told me the wrong time. They told me we started at 2 o'clock, it really started at 12:30. Luckily, Stephen already left Australia, and I couldn't fax him and tell him the new time. So he got there at 12:30, Michael got there at 12:30. They had a full room of public health officials and health advocates who were very interested in this issue, and that's a great sign. And I hear that Stephen and Michael really saved the day and did a fantastic job in making a debate within an organization that really hasn't really faced this issue in the past. So I want to thank you for that, and welcome Stephen Mugford, please.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm only going to speak to you at this point for about maybe 1 minute. I principally want to introduce Bill Stronach, which I'll do in a moment. He will effectively chair this session and make introductory comments. And Alex and I guess, will be the principal speakers. In introducing Bill to you, I want to tell you a little story about what he's been doing and about his presence here. When we first discussed the question of whether he might come to this session, I said, look, you know, you ran the International Harm Reduction Conference in Melbourne. It was a major international conference. We had speakers from all over the world. We had a very high level of representation within Australia. Come along and talk to these people at least about the experience of running the conference, the successes and the problems. Yeah, that's a good idea, he said. We sat down last night and he said, you know, I've got a real difficulty with this. And I said, what's that? He said, well, we didn't have any problems. And I said, I think people would like to know that. I think that in a way illustrates, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Bill, but I think that illustrates one of the things that we might want to say about Australia, that you could run a large international conference on harm reduction in relation to drugs and not have substantial problems. Bill ran this conference because he is the director of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation of Victoria, one of our largest non-government organisation bodies in Australia. In fact, it's rapidly becoming the Australian Drug Foundation. I don't know whether you've adopted that new name, but you're certainly about to. And is one of the principal players in the field of drugs and drug policy. It's my pleasure to introduce Bill. He will chair this session, and he will make introductory comments. And I'd like you to welcome him to the podium. Thank you.
Firstly, our Federal Minister for Health, Peter Staples, opened the conference, and he strongly endorsed the harm reduction approach. He strongly endorsed the role of needle and syringe exchanges, and he came out in an extremely strong way and made the statement that in his view there was no such hope as a drug-free society. Related to attitudes is the media, and we have focused as an organisation quite clearly strategically on the media. We've employed journalists not to churn out press releases but to get in there as subversives and work with their colleagues in the mainstream press, and that's been done through developing very slowly and very gently a level of trust, a level of credibility, more importantly the ability to respond, because the press want instant answers and they want instant responses. So we've got 24-hour availability of those journalists. And what we're finding now is that in the last 8 months, over 50% of the mainstream printed and radio and television reporting on alcohol and drug issues has now been generated by the foundation or has been filtered through it. And it's a wonderful opportunity when the press ring up, as they invariably do with some sensational story, asking for comment, for us to talk, often for an hour, and try and turn that around and get the reporting perhaps presented a different way, because we know that the nature of reporting that we've seen in the past has been sensational, it's been inaccurate, often dangerously inaccurate, and it's always, well, not always, but by and large focused on those drugs which are illicit, and their usage within Australia and the harm caused by them is minuscule compared to the legal drugs. So I'd like to introduce Alex Wodak, who is no doubt known to many of you, and if you've read the Blue program thoroughly, you'd note that Alex is the recipient, and the much deserved recipient, of the Norman Zinsberg Award for this year. He's the director of the Alcohol and Drug unit at St Vincent's Hospital in Sydney. He was the driving force behind the program side of the international conference that we held in Melbourne, and he was the driving force behind me in making sure the conference happened. I'd like to introduce Alex, and then I'll jump up again and introduce Steve. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, it's been a very great privilege to be invited by your organisation to address you this morning, in fact to be your voice this morning, and I'm very glad that you're going to have Arnold Treback as your voice for the next 4 years. I feel I have a lot of gratitude to pay to your country and to your government for many, many reasons, some of which might appear perhaps frivolous to you. One of the things we Australians have to be grateful to your government for is in relation to HIV prevention among injecting drug users, because it was your government which allowed your population to serve as the non-intervention control group, which has been to the immense benefit of the population of my country. And I can't tell you how many times we have quoted the US experience to our government about what would happen if you didn't introduce needle and syringe exchange, if you didn't increase methadone availability, if you didn't have more flexible drug policies. So thank you to the people of this country and to the United States government. Your misfortune.